Hello everybody, recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 46 of the Movement Debrief. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, this one's gonna be something else. We're gonna talk about neck training, neck strength. What do you do to get your neck all ripped, especially if you're in a grappling sport? We're gonna talk about this guy right here, narrow infrasternal angles. We'll go a little bit deeper into that. I'll talk about some new things that I'm playing around with that are helpful for these people. That's what we're gonna do after that. And then last but not least, my joint went out. Where did it go? I'll give you that answer just right this moment. Before I do that, I want you guys to know, September 15th and 16th, Human Matrix is coming your way in Seattle, Washington. There are signups available. I'll link it in the show notes. Without further ado though, let's answer some questions asked from the people, answered by this people, for the people, fam recognized fam. Let's debrief, shall we? First question comes from Michael Savage. What a dope name. Hey Zach, short version of the question. How would you go about training a person for neck strength when they are participating in a grappling or head impact sport? Elaborated. Ooh, if you guys want the long version, here's the long version. How would you go about training neck strength in a safe manner for BJJ/wrestling? Would it be different for striking sports, boxing, football, soccer, due to head impacts? Would you even attempt to strengthen the neck? If so, how would you address the different planes, assuming they have sagittal planes taken care of? Blah, 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 blah. The natural way to train the neck for strength is sagittal plane safe. We're talking back bridges with 3 points of contact, 2 feet, and your head and neck extension. I'll link a picture of those bad boys in the show notes. Neck extension. Let's see, what else we got? Some more contacts, breaking alignment and posture is a big deal when grappling someone. What would you do? Michael, that's an unbelievable question, and I'm gonna answer it for you. Short answer is I wouldn't do much at all. The long answer, there's things that need to be done to help get your neck freaky strong. Why wouldn't I do something? I'll tell you why. Because I'm a physical therapist and a strength coach, and I really don't think that there's anything that we can do in those disciplines that is going to prepare the neck for the forces that they may incur in their respective sports, whether it's BJJ, whether it's football, whether it's whatever. Doing a bunch of resisted neck stuff, because you can't do much weight, is a very small amount of force generated by the neck. Whereas trying to resist someone ripping your head off in wrestling, there's way more force involved in that. You have, depending your weight class, however many pounds the dude or the chick is that's trying to beat you up, trying to break your neck in two. You have to be able to generate enough strength to prevent that action from happening. Same thing with football. I can't think of any neck strengthening exercise that can prepare you to get clocked by a 300-pound lineman coming at you, 20 miles an hour, whatever they are, with their fast 40s. I don't think there's anything we can do as coaches to help that. What needs to be done to protect the neck, shout out to the Wu-Tang, to protect your neck is to put yourself into positions within your sport that challenge neck strength. So if you are going to be in a back bridge position at some point in time, whether it's wrestling, whether it's BJJ, you need to put yourself in that position. If you have someone getting you in a rear naked choke in BJJ, and you are trying to wrestle free, whether it's moving your neck or your arms, whatever, you need to put yourself in those positions so you can expose your neck to the forces that you will incur. And not just in practice, but you also want to practice against the competition you're going to be going up against. If you're going to be fighting a freaky strong dude in your event who is going to knock your neck apart, you need to find a close surrogate, at least as close as possible, to that individual who you'll be going up against. So you want someone who's equally as strong to put you through those forces. A sport like football or soccer, where the head-on collisions are less predictable and not necessarily desirable, and in some cases illegal, that's a little bit tougher to sell because you don't want to necessarily have someone hit you in the head so many times because of the risks of getting a concussion, among other things. That's no bueno, especially if you look at what the NFL people are doing nowadays, or how they're dealing with all of the stuff that's been going on with the concussions. But the best key to reducing your chances of breaking your neck or getting a concussion or getting some type of damage from a head-on collision is prevention. And the prevention starts in the little leagues, in high school, in these areas where tackling is taught in an appropriate manner. Like if you are not taught how to tackle effectively, then guess what? You're going to do something stupid and probably hurt yourself or someone else. So being able to perform the technical aspects of your sport incredibly well will do wonders for safeguarding not just yourself but for others. And that's really where it has to start with those field sports. But really, even if we did everything in our power to set up a protective realm, or did things to coach athletes effectively so they don't do these head collisions, they're still going to happen. Sport is chaotic and it is oftentimes unpredictable. And some of the ways that you can get hit in various sports just cannot be matched in practice, in the weight room, and definitely sometimes in game, because you might get hit one way really hard and the next way might not be hard, but maybe it's at the right angle and boom, you're done. So I don't really have a good answer for those scenarios, but I do think that neck strength, the stuff that we can do as clinicians and coaches, is not going to make up for the deficit that you have in terms of force production in these sports. So the best thing you can do is keep yourself in really good shape. If you're in a sport like football or soccer, make yourself fast enough so you don't get hit so often, and do everything in your power to use technique to keep yourself protected. I think those are probably the big things I would say you can do from a field sport standpoint. From a combat sport standpoint, put yourself in positions that are going to challenge or require great demand of your neck to hold a particular position, and just continue to drill those. And in my opinion, those are probably the best things you can do to keep your neck strong. Michael, phenomenal question. Next question comes from Ryan. Ryan asks, could you go into further detail about narrow infrasternal angles? It sounds like you are saying, in previous explanations, that the diaphragm is descending too far and inverting. What led to this theory / conclusion? Ryan, great question. I get a lot of questions about the infrasternal angle, so hopefully by going into a little bit more detail with the narrow, we can make sure we are crystal clear about what a narrow infrasternal angle is and how you would go about treating it. So the infrasternal angle, for those who don't know, find the sternum, hard part. Once you get to the rubbery part, that's your xiphoid process. Press it a little bit, touch yourself. You're going to put your thumb on the xiphoid process, and you're going to, the tip of your thumb I should say, you're going to take the base of your thumb, put it up against the rib cage so you get a little outline, just like so. You're going to do the same thing on the other side. And you want to measure an angle. Ideally, we're shooting for a 90-degree total or 45 per side. Symmetrical, in theory. With a narrow infrasternal angle, you would have less than 45 degree on one side or both sides. The total angle would be less than 90 degrees. I typically shoot for most people between 85 and 95 as a practical tip. What is going on mechanically? We think, and I'm basing this off of some of the stuff that Detroyer has written, and I'll link some of his articles in the show notes if I can find them. I did some of the talk, or I did some of the research on this for Respiration Revisited. I'll link that as well. So I'm not sure exactly which article it is, but we need to look at the mechanics of the lower rib cage as the diaphragm descends. So here's what happens. Let's say the diaphragm is going, and my wrists are the rib cage. As the diaphragm descends, the rib cage, the lower aspect, begins to bucket handle and widens outward. So it's descending, the rib cage widens outward. The infrasternal angle ought to widen a little bit. That's normal mechanics, and it has to do with the pressure changes in the thorax and the abdomen, and it has to do with the action of the diaphragm on the rib cage. It attaches there. as the diaphragm descends further to flat. Now, something I may have been in error before saying was the diaphragm descends past flat. Can't do that because the guts are there. So the diaphragm can flatten though, especially in cases where you have some type of hyperinflation syndrome such as COPD. As the diaphragm flattens, the diaphragm does not invert, but the action of the diaphragm on the rib cage changes. What happens is the rib cage, which was expanding previously, inverts. And so you have a reduction of the lateral dimensions of the rib cage as the diaphragm goes to flat. When that happens, the external obliques can get leverage. And if you look at the line of pull of the external obliques, which run this way, if you imagine you're putting your hand in your pocket and then you put your hand right where your ribs are, that's the line of pull of the external obliques. But you can see that the external obliques are going to pull the rib cage forward, like so. And because they attach on the outer aspect of the rib cage, they will externally rotate the ribs. So the infrasternal angle then becomes much narrower than is possible when the diaphragm is maximally ascended. Those are the mechanics that at least we are thinking about when talking about a narrow infrasternal angle. Now here's the deal. When we're talking about addressing and improving an infrasternal angle to get to that 90-degree ideal that we're shooting for, models are wrong, blah, blah, blah. But when we're trying to get that to happen, there's a few things that we need to be able to do. We need to be able to get that diaphragm, which is flattened, to fully ascend. But remember, guys, the dimensions of the rib cage are much more compressed in the lateral aspects. So what can happen sometimes is if I exhale too forcefully or I don't put my body in the right position, is air will get trapped in the lower portion of the lungs because the diaphragm can't fully ascend. The lateral dimensions of the rib cage via the narrow infrasternal angle won't allow for it. So you might only get rid of the air upstairs, the air up there. How about that method? So what you need to do is create some type of strategies to allow for that diaphragm to maximally ascend while sneak attacking or being sneaky around the compressive action of the external obliques. Now you're probably wondering, Zach, how do I do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here's what you're going to do. First off, breathe in, because we have to breathe to get the diaphragm to ascend. You got to be sneaky. A forceful exhale is going to increase recruitment of the external oblique. So what you have to do is let out a very long, open mouth sigh, so you do not get the external obliques to contract too nastily. I believe that's the technical term. And that should allow the diaphragm to ascend. So it should be like so. I silently inhale as if Michael Myers is on the other side of the door from Halloween. Or if you saw The Love Guru, maybe Michael Myers from Austin Powers fame. Silent inhale. Did you guys hear that? Exactly. You shouldn't hear it. The exhale. I told you the worst joke of all time. You couldn't believe I told you that joke. It has to be an open mouth, prolonged sigh. It takes me a while because I'm full of hot air. But you want to ensure that all of the air gets out. I tell my peeps, hey, exhale for about 5 to 8 seconds before you take that next inhale. Pause. P-A-U-S-E, 3 to 5 seconds, whatever you got. That's going to allow the diaphragm to ascend. It will ensure that you do not hyperventilate, because I'm sure you guys have a lot of people while you're doing this stuff who get a little bit lightheaded as they're doing this stuff. No bueno. So you do that, and then last but not least, you repeat the process. So that's the breathing side for the narrow infrasternal angle. From a positional aspect, the lateral dimensions are decreased. Because the external oblique pulls the ribcage forward, the anterior to posterior dimensions are increased. So what we have to do is compress those bad boys. Here's how you're going to do it. I need something on the front side that can compress the ribcage back. Here's what you need. At the sternum, the pecs, if you look from a top-down view, can push the sternum back if I contract them simultaneously. Compressing this way will allow the upper rib cage to expand laterally. There is a little bit of bucket handle with the upper ribs, just saying. Lower wise, I need the internal obliques and transversus abdominis, which attach on the innermost aspect of the rib cage to IR the ribs or bend them. If we get those guys, and then if you want to really kick it up a notch, because of the lower body stuff, you kick in both of your adductors, so a tight squeeze, pecs, boom, you're in business. That's what we do with the narrow infrasternal angle. In terms of me diving in a little bit more to the lower body demands with the narrow infrasternal angle, in patterned individuals, the infrapubic angle matches the infrasternal angle, so it is narrowed. The bilateral contraction of the adductor muscles will open up that infrapubic angle, thus opening up the pelvic outlet. That's why we do that. So we open up that, we open up this laterally, and the IOs and TAs, internal obliques, transversus abdominis, open up this laterally. I'll give you a few exercises, I'll link them in the show notes, but my big moves are diamond bear variations. I like wall reaches with squeeze. I like the sideline pec twist to drive a little bit of rib internal rotation. I like squats. I do a toe touch to squat. That is money in the bank, shorty, what you think. Those are really kind of my big four to start people off with. I'll link them all in the show notes. But if you do those things, if you allow air to get completely out by not engaging external obliques too much, you kick in pecs, you kick in the deep abs, internal obliques, transversus abdominis, you kick in your adductors, what should happen is the diaphragm should be able to ascend, your infrasternal angle should become normalized, your people will be happy, the angels will sing, life is good, and you will stay in business. That is a great question, Ryan. Last question comes from Alejandra. Alejandra asks, I've had practitioners tell clients that joints go in and out of place. What is really going on? Alejandra, I'm glad you asked. So, spoiler alert, this doesn't happen. I'm going to tell you why it doesn't happen, folks. A couple things. Well, let me step back. There are some cases where joints do go out of place. Usually this involves traumatic events. For example, I was playing basketball in Page. You guys are going to notice a common theme. And one of my buddies was playing, against me, and you know how big he is. He'd be doing all sorts of wild, crazy things, hitting threes, all types of stuff. Maybe that step back. Maybe I'll hit you with the euro. But we were playing basketball, and my boy went up for a layup, and he goes up, he goes under, and dislocates his shoulder. Had the sulcus sign and everything. It was amazing. Felt bad for the guy, but we kind of left him. Point being, don't play basketball with me. A deal you better recognize. So that was clearly a joint went out of place. We went to x-rays, we went to the emergency room, and it was put back in place. Now here's the deal. In order for that joint to be put back in place, what they had to do was put him under. They gave him a little bit of anesthesia because this shit hurts. You can't put a joint back in place in the clinic like it's something willy-nilly. And people will fight you doing so. So to say that joints can go out of place, yeah, if there's a traumatic incident. That could happen at just about any joint if the trauma is bad enough. But things like shoulders, things like hip dislocations for people who are incredibly lax, you fall out on an outstretched hand and you dislocate something in your wrist, these things happen. But usually it's secondary to trauma. Here's what doesn't happen, and here's why it doesn't happen. You do something, you drop a pen on the floor, and you go to bend over and you get pain in the lower portion of the ribs. Or maybe the upper portion of the ribs. Oh crap, my rib must have went out. Where did it go? And then you go to your clinician, whoever you want, and they put it back into place, and all is so much better. Can you just see the contrast between these two things? I have trauma where maybe a surgical intervention or anesthesia is needed to put the joint back in place. And then I have Joe Schmo clinician saying, oh, your SI is out, let's put it back in. Come on, fam. We don't do that. And the reason why we don't do that is a two-part reason. The first reason, let's talk about palpation. For those who don't know, for those who haven't read the palpation research, I wouldn't. And the reason why is because it's piss poor. We do not have good reliability, both inter and intra, to palpate the things we think we're palpating. And if we're getting to bones in certain areas, for example, lumbar spine, I don't know if you guys have been on a cadaver at all, but I have multiple. When you go on a cadaver, you have to cut through so much darn tissue to be able to get to the joints themselves or the vertebrae. You mean to tell me that through some type of palpatory mechanism that you can tell if a joint is out of place and you need to put it back in? Come on, man. You gotta be kidding me. Same thing with the SI joint. How can the SI joint, which moves millimeters, go out? How can you detect that with these fingers? I can't, and I can do crazy things with these fingers. Just come to the clinic, or never mind. Anyways, what you're gonna do is consider that palpation is an unreliable assessment. It doesn't work. I was taught in the residency that it was good, that I could palpate L5, L4, L3, L2, L1, and then you know what, you go up to the cervical spine, C7, C6, ooh, C5's a little tight. Let me just go ahead and move that. False. Wrong. Can't do it. You're not be able to do it. Not reliably, at least. Everyone has anatomical differences, even slightly. And that can throw off what we think we're feeling through our hands. We just have too much tissue to go through. That's piece one. The assessment don't work. The second piece has to do with manual therapy. There is a great research article, and I will link it to the show notes, fam, called, I think it's called Mechanisms of Manual Therapy. And guess what? They have demonstrated that we do not do much from a tissue change standpoint with our manual therapy interventions. And that includes joint manipulation, which is typically what is utilized to put joints back in. What is going on instead is some type of neurophysiological mechanism. And it's probably idiosyncratic to each individual, but what's probably going on is when some type of manual intervention is performed, whether it's a mobilization or a manipulation, you get some stimulation of mechanoreceptors within the tissues around the surrounding area. You probably get some endogenous opioid production, which can help decrease the pain response. That's actually what happens. The fingers go down, decrease the pain response, among many other things. You maybe get some refreshing of the somatosensory homunculus. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about when I do manual therapy. What I'm not doing is likely changing tissues. The only things that can change tissue is trauma, actually trauma. Because if you think about it, you have some type of traumatic injury, that can change tissue properties, but also the trauma of training can change tissue properties. But can us people, doing some manipulations or many other things, change whether a joint is in and out of place? Not in the clinic, but you will in the emergency room. So, to summarize, joints do go out, but typically that's traumatic incidences in which the joints do go out. What they don't do is go out and you put them back in a clinic. It just doesn't happen. That's just not the way manual therapy works. And moreover, we can't tell as clinicians whether a joint is in or out with our hands. Moreover too, some of the areas that do go out, like let's say my upper rib goes out, like maybe rib 4, well guess what? That attaches to the sternum. You mean to tell me that one rib goes out and you gotta put that one back in? Come on, fam. Don't buy it. What we do instead from a manual therapy standpoint is we are likely just doing some type of sensory input to the area in question that leads to a local response via mechanoreception, endogenous opioid production, and likely a systemic response of those factors as well. So educate your people properly. Let them know that you are not putting a joint out of, or a joint back into place, because that can have lead to a lot of maladaptive beliefs. And just tell them what's going on. Hey, you got some pain here. I don't think there's anything that's going on that makes me think this is a serious thing. We're going to try a few things, see if we can improve your movement capabilities in that area. Maybe get you feeling a little bit more comfortable with some hands-on. What do you say about that? I think if we do those things, you ought to be in business. Say exactly that if you want. Great question, Alejandra, and I think that's a good stopping point for us tonight. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 46 of the Movement Debrief. I'm going to cut it short by just saying, guys, if you want to learn more about me, go to zachcouples.com, sign up for the newsletter. You'll get weekend learning goodies and a bunch of free stuff. I have some services offered, such as mentorship, movement consultations, online training. I could do all types of cool things for you in those domains. Go ahead and look it up on the interwebs. You can also find me on social media. There's links on my page to get there. Also, if you want to listen to some of these other debriefs and not look at this joker, I don't blame you. Subscribe to me on iTunes or Stitcher. Just search the Zach Couples Show. That's what you got to do to find me. I hope you guys keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving, and I'll see you next time. Deuces.